The crack of Karen's palm against the guard's cheek reverberated through the palace corridor like thunder. For a moment, time seemed frozen. The tourists gasped collectively, their faces showing horror and disbelief. Even Karen herself seemed stunned by what she had just done. The guard's head had turned slightly from the force of the blow, a red mark already forming on his pale cheek. But what happened next defied every expectation. Instead of remaining silent and motionless as his training dictated, the guard slowly turned his face back to look directly at Karen. His eyes, which had been staring straight ahead moments before, now locked onto hers with an intensity that made her take an involuntary step backward. There was something in those eyes, not anger, not pain, but something far more unsettling. Recognition and calculation. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The fact that he had spoken at all sent shockwaves through the crowd. Royal guards simply did not speak while on duty. Ever. Karen's moment of uncertainty passed quickly, replaced by her familiar rage. "Finally. Now maybe you'll show me some respect. I want to speak to your supervisor immediately, and I want your name and badge number." The guard remained looking at her, his expression unreadable. "My name is not important right now," he said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his ceremonial role. "But yours is, Mrs. Mitchell." Karen's confidence faltered. How did he know her name? She hadn't introduced herself to anyone yet. Her private tour wasn't scheduled to begin for another 10 minutes. A chill ran down her spine, but her pride wouldn't let her show weakness. "Of course you know my name," she blustered, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "I told you I have connections. Important connections. People who matter." The guard tilted his head slightly, and for the first time a ghost of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Yes, I'm well aware of your connections, Mrs. Mitchell. Perhaps more aware than you realize." Something in his tone made the tourist nearby start backing away slowly. The other palace staff members were now whispering urgently into their radios. The atmosphere had shifted from shocked silence to something more dangerous, the feeling that they were all witnessing something that shouldn't be happening. Karen's mind raced. Who was this guard? Why was he speaking to her like he knew her? And why was everyone else looking increasingly nervous? "I don't know what game you're playing," she said, trying to regain control of the situation, "but I assure you it won't end well for you. Do you have any idea who my husband works for? Do you know what I could do to your career?" The guard's smile widened slightly. "Your husband works for Hartwell & Associates, a mid-level consulting firm that handles government contracts. Your daughter Sarah is studying at Cambridge, though her grades are struggling this semester. Your son Michael dropped out of university last year and is currently living in your basement. You drive a leased BMW, live in a house with a mortgage you're 3 payments behind on, and your important connections consist mainly of your book club and your local council member, whom you met exactly once at a charity dinner." Karen's face went white. Every word he had spoken was true. But how could he possibly know these things? Her carefully constructed facade of importance and influence was crumbling before her eyes, and she found herself unable to speak. The guard stepped closer, breaking protocol even further. "The question now, Mrs. Mitchell, is what happens next? You've just assaulted a member of the Queen's Guard in front of dozens of witnesses, but more importantly, you've assaulted someone who knows exactly who you really are." Karen's legs felt weak. The confidence that had carried her through life was evaporating like mist, but something even worse was dawning on her. If this guard knew so much about her private life, what else might he know? And more terrifyingly, who exactly was she dealing with? The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from multiple directions, and Karen realized that whatever was about to happen next would change her life forever. The footsteps belonged to palace security, but they weren't rushing toward Karen as she had expected. Instead, they approached the guard with a deference that made no sense. A man in an expensive suit hurried forward, his face pale with concern. "Sir," the suited man said quietly to the guard, completely ignoring Karen's presence. "We witnessed what happened. Are you injured? Should we summon medical attention?" Karen's mouth fell open. "Sir, they were calling a palace guard, sir?" Her mind struggled to process what was happening. Guards were supposed to be the lowest-ranking personnel in the palace hierarchy, yet everyone around her was treating this man like he outranked them all. The guard, though Karen was beginning to suspect he was much more than that, touched his cheek briefly. "I'm fine, Harrison, though I think we need to have a conversation with Mrs. Mitchell here about appropriate behavior during palace visits." Harrison's eyes flicked to Karen with barely concealed disgust. "Of course, sir. Shall I have her removed from the premises immediately?" "Not yet," the guard replied, his gaze never leaving Karen's face. "I think Mrs. Mitchell deserves to understand exactly what she's done, and to whom she's done it." Karen found her voice, though it came out as a croak. "I don't understand what's happening here. You're just a guard. A ceremonial guard. You don't have authority over anyone." Several of the palace staff members exchanged glances, and Karen caught the unmistakable sound of suppressed laughter. The guard himself seemed genuinely amused by her statement. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, beginning to remove his tall black hat, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. You see, I'm not actually a palace guard." Karen's world tilted. "What do you mean you're not a guard? You're wearing the uniform. You were standing at your post." "I was filling in," he explained calmly. Setting his hat aside, "One of our regular guards called in sick this morning, and I happened to be available. I thought it might be interesting to experience what our dedicated guardsmen go through every day. I wanted to understand their challenges firsthand." The truth was starting to dawn on Karen, but her mind rejected it. It was too impossible, too humiliating to consider. She watched in growing horror as the man began to straighten his uniform with movements that spoke natural authority rather than trained obedience. "You still haven't told me who you are," she whispered, though part of her no longer wanted to know the answer. Harrison stepped forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, allow me to introduce you to His Royal Highness, Prince Edward, Duke of Wessex." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, and she had to grab onto a nearby velvet rope to keep from falling. A prince. She had slapped a prince. Not just any prince, but a member of the royal family. The same royal family whose home she was visiting as a guest. Prince Edward watched her reaction with clinical interest. "Now you're beginning to understand the gravity of your situation, aren't you, Mrs. Mitchell?" Karen's voice came out as barely a whisper. I didn't know. You were supposed to be a guard. Guards don't fight back. Guards stay silent." "Guards do stay silent," the prince agreed. "But I am not a guard. I am a member of the British royal family, and you have just committed what amounts to an assault on my person, witnessed by dozens of people, recorded by multiple security cameras, and documented by palace staff." The reality of her situation crashed over Karen like a wave. This wasn't just a public embarrassment or a social media scandal. This was an international incident. This was the kind of mistake that could destroy not just her Heave but her entire family's future. "Your Highness," she stammered, dropping to her knees on the marble floor. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I would never. Please, you have to understand. I thought you were just a guard." Prince Edward looked down at her with an expression that mixed pity with something much colder. "The question now, Mrs. Mitchell, is what we do about this situation. Because I assure you, the consequences for what you've done are far more serious than you can possibly imagine." The corridor had fallen completely silent except for the sound of Karen's ragged breathing. Every person present understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that would have repercussions far beyond this moment. And Prince Edward was just getting started. Prince Edward gestured for Karen to stand, though his expression remained stern. The tourists who had witnessed the incident were being quietly escorted away by palace staff, but not before several had managed to capture the moment on their phones. The age of social media meant that Karen's assault on a member of the royal family would be global news within hours. "Mrs. Mitchell," Prince Edward said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of royal authority, "do you understand the full implications of what you've done?" Karen struggled to her feet, her legs shaking uncontrollably. "Your Highness, please, I made a terrible mistake. I'll do anything to make this right. Anything." "Will you?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, "because the anything you're offering might be more than you're prepared to give." Harrison approached with a tablet in his hands. "Sir, the security footage has been reviewed. We have the entire incident documented from multiple angles. Mrs. Mitchell's assault on your person is crystal clear. Karen's heart sank further. Video evidence meant there would be no way to deny what had happened, no way to spin the story in her favor. Her mind raced through the potential consequences: arrest, prosecution, international humiliation, her husband's career destroyed, her children's futures ruined. "Please," she begged, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "I have a family. I have children. This was just a moment of madness. I would never normally—" "Never normally what?" Prince Edward interrupted sharply. "Never normally assault service workers. Never normally throw public tantrums when you don't get your way, because from what I've observed and what I know about your history, this behavior is entirely typical for you." Karen's face burned with shame. How could he know about her history? How much did he actually know about her life? "You see, Mrs. Mitchell," the prince continued, "when someone makes threats about their important connections and their ability to destroy careers, we take those threats seriously. So we investigated. Would you to know what we found?" Karen shook her head frantically, but Prince Edward continued anyway. "We found a pattern of abuse towards service workers that goes back years. Restaurant staff, hotel employees, retail workers, government clerks, all subjected to your verbal abuse and threats. We found complaints filed against you that were later withdrawn after you made more threats. We found a trail of intimidation and entitlement that would make most people ashamed." Each word was like a dagger to Karen's heart. Her worst behaviors, the ones she thought no one would ever connect or care about, had been compiled and reviewed by the royal family's security apparatus. "But what's most interesting," Prince Edward said, his voice growing colder, "is what we found about your so-called important connections. Would you care to explain to me exactly what influence you had over the royal family?" Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The truth was that she had no real connections at all. Her claims had been elaborate bluffs, designed to intimidate people who couldn't verify her stories. She had never imagined that anyone would actually investigate her claims. "I thought not," Prince Edward said, "so let me explain your actual situation. You are a middle-class woman with delusions of grandeur, who has just assaulted a member of the British royal family. You have no political connections, no social influence, and no ability to protect yourself from the consequences of your actions." Harrison stepped forward again. "Sir, the Metropolitan Police have been notified. They're requesting permission to proceed with charges." Karen felt the world spinning around her. Police charges meant arrest, trial, conviction, prison time. Her life as she knew it was over. However, Prince Edward said, and Karen caught onto that word like a lifeline, "I am not without compassion. You say you have children." "Yes," Karen whispered. "2 children. Sarah is at Cambridge, and Michael, he's still finding his way." "And your husband?" "He's a good man," Karen said quickly. "He doesn't know about how I behave sometimes. He works hard, he pays our bills, he doesn't deserve to be destroyed because of my mistakes." Prince Edward nodded slowly. "Then perhaps we can discuss an alternative to criminal prosecution. But I warn you, Mrs. Mitchell, what I'm about to propose will require you to fundamentally change who you are as a person. And if you fail to live up to your end of the bargain, the consequences will be far worse than anything you're facing now." Karen looked up at him with desperate hope. There was still a way out. There had to be. But as she looked into Prince Edward's eyes, she realized that whatever he was about to propose would change her life, just as completely as criminal prosecution would, just in a very different way. Prince Edward walked slowly around Karen, his footsteps echoing in the now empty corridor. The other tourists had been escorted away, leaving only palace staff and security personnel as witnesses to what was about to unfold. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, his voice measured and deliberate, "I'm going to offer you a choice. You can face the full legal consequences of assaulting a member of the royal family, arrest, trial, likely conviction and imprisonment. Your husband will lose his job when his employers discover his wife is an international criminal. Your daughter will be expelled from Cambridge due to the scandal. Your son will never recover from the shame." Karen's tears flowed freely now. Each consequence he described was entirely realistic and would destroy everyone she cared about. "Or," Prince Edward continued, "you can accept my alternative proposal. Anything, Karen said immediately. I'll do anything. Don't agree so quickly, the prince warned. You don't know what I'm about to ask of you. He stopped walking and faced her directly. For the next 12 months you will work as a volunteer in service positions throughout London. You will work in soup kitchens, homeless shelters, charity shops and hospitals. You will clean toilets, serve food, wash dishes, and perform every menial task that the service workers you've abused have been doing while you tormented them. Karen's initial relief began to fade. A year of manual labor, a year of serving others. Furthermore, Prince Edward continued, you will be supervised by palace staff. Any sign of your old behavior, any rudeness to co-workers, any attempts to assert superiority, any refusal to complete your assigned tasks, and you will immediately face the criminal charges you're currently avoiding. The terms were starting to sink in. Karen realized she was being offered a chance to avoid prison, but only by becoming everything she had always looked down upon. You will also, the prince added, write personal apology letters to every service worker you can remember abusing. We will help you identify them through security footage and witness accounts. You will deliver these letters in person and apologize face-to-face for your behavior. Karen's pride rebelled against the idea, apologizing to restaurant servers, to shop clerks, to people she considered beneath her. It felt like torture. But most importantly, Prince Edward said, his voice becoming harder, you will never again use the phrase, do you know who I am, or make threats about your connections or influence, because now you know exactly who you are, someone who owes her freedom to the mercy of the people she once considered inferior. Harrison approached with a thick document. The terms of the agreement, sir. If Mrs. Mitchell signs, the criminal charges will be suspended pending successful completion of her service requirements. Karen stared at the contract. 12 months of her life doing work she had never imagined herself capable of. 12 months of humility, service and supervision. It seemed impossible. What if I refuse? She asked quietly. Then you'll be arrested within the hour, Prince Edward replied matter-of-factly. The charges will proceed, and by tomorrow morning your photograph will be on the front page of every newspaper in the world as the woman who slapped a prince. Your family's destruction will be complete and irreversible. Karen thought about her husband, coming home from work to find police cars in their driveway. She thought about Sarah being called into the dean's office at Cambridge. She thought about Michael already struggling with his self-worth, learning that his mother had become an international embarrassment. If I do this, she said slowly, if I complete your program, what happens then? Then you'll have learned what it means to serve others instead of being served, Prince Edward replied. You'll understand the dignity of honest work and the value of treating people with respect. And perhaps, if you truly change, you'll discover that respect is earned through character, not demanded through intimidation. Karen looked around the corridor where her life had changed forever. The marble floors, the gilded walls, the portraits of centuries of royalty, all of it represented a world where she had never belonged despite her delilans of grandeur. I need to know, she said, her voice barely audible. Will my family be protected? Will my husband keep his job? Will my children be safe from scandal? Prince Edward's expression softened slightly. If you complete the program successfully, this incident will never become public knowledge. The witnesses have signed confidentiality agreements. The security footage will be sealed. Your family will never know how close they came to losing everything. For the first time since the slap, Karen felt a glimmer of hope. Her family could be saved. Her children could have their futures. Her husband could keep his dignity. All she had to do was sacrifice her own pride for 12 months. She reached for the pen Harrison was offering. But as she prepared to sign, Prince Edward added one final condition that would test her resolve, like nothing else. Before you sign, Prince Edward said, his voice carrying a note of finality, there's one more condition. The most important one. Karen's hand froze above the contract. What more could he possibly demand? Your first assignment begins today. Right now. You'll start in the palace kitchens, serving lunch to the staff who witnessed your assault on me. They know who you are, they know what you did, and they know you're here as punishment, not choice. The blood drained from Karen's face. The humiliation would be immediate and complete. She would have to face the very people who had seen her at her absolute worst, and serve them food while they watched her with the ardor of pity and justice. Furthermore, Prince Edward continued, you'll be working alongside the guard whose position I was filling today, Guardsman Peters. He's the man you intended to abuse before you discovered you were actually abusing Bew. He'll be your direct supervisor for your kitchen duties. Karen's legs nearly gave out. Not only would she have to serve the witnesses to her shame, but she'd be supervised by the very person she had tried to bully, the person whose place Prince Edward had taken. I don't know how to work in a kitchen, she stammered. Then you'll learn, Prince Edward replied simply. Just like millions of people learn new skills every day to earn their living. The difference is they do it by choice and necessity. You're doing it to avoid prison. Harrison handed her an apron and a hairnet. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Karen Mitchell, who had spent her life demanding service from others, was about to become a servant herself. Your shift starts in 10 minutes, Prince Edward said, checking his watch. Guardsman Peters is waiting for you in the kitchen. He'll explain your duties, and you'll follow his instructions exactly. Any resistance, any attitude, any attempt to assert authority and our agreement is void. Karen took the apron with trembling hands. The fabric felt rough and foreign against her manicured fingers. She had never worn work clothes in her life, never performed manual labor, never taken orders from someone she considered within her social status. Your Highness, she said quietly, what if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough to change? Prince Edward's expression became almost philosophical. Mrs. Mitchell, every person who has ever worked in service, every janitor, every server, every cleaner, has had to swallow their pride and do jobs that others might consider beneath them. They do it with dignity because they understand that honest work has honor, regardless of how others perceive it. He gestured toward the corridor that led to the kitchen. The difference between you and them is that they chose service as their profession. You're choosing it as your salvation. The question is whether you value your furnace future more than your pride. Karen nodded slowly, understanding that this was her moment of truth. She could sign the contract and begin a journey that would strip away everything she thought made her important, or she could maintain her pride and watch her family's world collapse. As she walked toward the kitchen, still wearing her expensive dress, but now also wearing an apron, she could hear the murmur of voices ahead. The palace staff were waiting, knowing that the woman who had slapped their prince was about to serve them lunch. The kitchen doors swung open, and Karen found herself face to face with Guardsman Peters. He was younger than she had expected, with kind eyes but a firm expression. He had heard about the morning's ints, of course. Everyone had heard. Mrs. Mitchell, he said professionally, welcome to the palace kitchen. Today you'll be serving meals to approximately 50 staff members. Many of them witnessed what happened this morning, so I imagine this will be educational for you. Karen looked around the bustling kitchen. Steam rose from industrial-sized pots, orders were being called out, and dozens of meals were being prepared with military precision. It was a world she had never imagined existing, let alone participating in. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. Guardsman Peters handed her a serving spoon. You'll be working the lunch line. Each person will tell you what they want, and you'll serve it with a smile. You'll say please and thank you, and you're welcome. And Mrs. Mitchell? Yes. Remember that these people have been doing this job with pride and dignity while you've been out there treating service workers like garbage. Today you get to learn what real work feels like. As the first staff member approached the serving line, Karen realized that her education in humility was about to begin in the most direct way possible. And somewhere behind her she knew Prince Edward was watching, waiting to see if she was truly capable of change. The transformation of Karen Mitchell had begun. 6 months later, Karen stood in the same palace corridor where her life had changed forever. But the woman standing there now bore little resemblance to the entitled, angry person who had slapped a prince. Her hands were calloused from months of hard work, her expensive manicure replaced by short, practical nails. Her designer clothes had been traded for simple, functional garments suitable for the various jobs she'd been assigned. Prince Edward approached her, his expression thoughtful as he observed the changes in her appearance and demeanor. Mrs. Mitchell, he said formally, though his tone was warmer than it had been 6 months ago. I've been reviewing your progress reports. Karen's heart raced. Had she failed somewhere? Had she shown attitude that she wasn't aware of? The fear of disappointing her supervisors had become second nature to her. Guardsman Peters tells me you've become one of the most reliable volunteers in the kitchen staff, Prince Edward continued. The homeless shelter manager says you arrive early and stay late. The charity shop coordinator gores you handle difficult customers with patience and kindness. Karen felt a flush of pride, followed immediately by surprise at her own reaction. When had she started taking pride in jobs she once would have considered beneath her? Your Highness, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. Something important. Go on. When I started this program, I thought it was punishment. I thought I was doing these jobs to avoid prison, to protect my family. But somewhere along the way it stopped being business and started being education. Prince Edward nodded, encouraging her to continue. I met a woman named Margaret at the homeless shelter, Karen said, her voice growing stronger. She used to be a teacher, but a series of tragedies left her on the streets. She has more dignity and grace than I ever had when I lived in my comfortable house and drove my fancy car. She taught me that respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn by how you treat others. The prince listened intently as Karen continued. And there's James at the charity shop. He's worked retail his entire life, dealing with people like the person I used to be. But he gets up every morning and treats every customer with kindness, even the ones who treat him terribly. He showed me that true strength isn't about making others feel small, it's about lifting them up even when they don't deserve it. Karen paused, looking around the corridor where her transformation had begun. I've written over 200 apology letters, Your Highness. I've delivered them in person to every service worker I could find that I had treated poorly. Do you know what the most amazing thing was? Tell me. Most of them forgave me. People I had screamed at, people I had threatened, people I had treated like they were invisible, they looked me in the eye and forgave me. They didn't do it because they had to, they did it because that's who they are. Prince Edward smiled for the first time since their initial encounter. And who are you now, Mrs. Mitchell? Karen thought carefully before answering. I'm someone who has learned that every person has dignity regardless of their job or station in life. I'm someone who has discovered that serving others isn't degrading, it is elevating. I'm someone who understands that do you know who I am is the wrong question entirely. The right question is how can I help? Your 12 months aren't finished yet, Prince Edward pointed out. I know, Karen replied. And when they are, I'm going to keep volunteering. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because I've found something in service that I never found in selfishness. I've found purpose. Prince Edward extended his hand to her, not as a prince to a subject, but as one person to another. Mrs. Mitchell, you've accomplished something remarkable. You've proven that people can change, that redemption is possible, and that sometimes the most profound transformations come from the most unexpected circumstances. Karen shook his hand, remembering the last time they had been this close, when her palm had struck his cheek in a moment of uncontrolled rage. Now their handshake represented mutual respect and the completion of a journey that had saved not just her family but her soul. There's just one more thing, Prince Edward said. The security footage of our initial encounter, I'm having it sealed permanently. Your family will never know how close they came to losing everything, and the world will never know that their mother and wife once slapped a prince. Your transformation is real, and it deserves to remain private. As Karen walked out of the palace that day, she passed the same guard post where she had first encountered Prince Edward. The current guard stood at attention, silent and dignified, just as Prince Edward had been that fateful morning. But this time Karen nodded respectfully to the guard and whispered, "Thank you for your service." The guard's eyes flickered briefly in acknowledgement, and Karen smiled. She finally understood that respect was a two-way street, and that the most important person she had learned to respect was herself, not the entitled, angry person she had been, but the humble, grateful person she had become. Her transformation was complete, but her journey of service was just beginning.